But isn't it true that the heartbeat bill is actually a misnomer? Because SB8, particularly for SB8, given that an embryo, because you use the word baby, and you're not a baby at 6 weeks, you're not even a fetus at 6 weeks, you're an embryo, does not have a fully formed heart at 6 weeks. And you want to say that doctors should check, but that flutter that you're talking about can't be heard with a stethoscope. So couldn't a doctor just argue, number one, and this is going to be sort of a long question, but couldn't a doctor just argue, I checked, but didn't hear anything? And also, it's not indicative, that flutter is not indicative of the development of a viable heart or of a viable pregnancy. The heart, doesn't really develop for another 6 weeks. And you can't even see the 4 chambers of the heart at 6 weeks. So isn't this kind of a misnomer? Sorry.
Great question. We had expert medical testimony before the State Affairs Committee. It happens to be the committee that I chair, where this bill was heard. And a 30-year pediatrician testified that the fetal heartbeat is the best evidence that the baby will develop to term and have a live birth. And so fetal heartbeat is the term in the statute because it's cardiac activity. It's funny, a lot of the folks—
But it's not even a fetus, though.
Well, many people say it's not a heartbeat, but they say, but it's not. So it's cardiac activity, not a heartbeat. And so, and I appreciate the point, and I do want to talk about it because we have to decide fundamentally, where does life begin? Does the little baby magically become alive when its head is delivered, but its body is not? Or an hour before it's delivered, when all the chromosomes are there, when all the genetic information is there, when its little body is developing? She's a human being. And so again, that's the question, right? When does life begin? If that's a human life in her mother's womb, we agree on this. If that's a human life, it's worthy of protection. And so that's the question. Medical testimony before our committee said that's a fetal heartbeat. That's the language we used. But to your prudential question about how do the doctors do it, they are required to use reasonable medical processes. And so the doc just can't say, no, I don't hear it. The doc's got to use the best technology available. Rather than prescribe what that is, we just said reasonable medical technology, medical procedures, because technology is going to change. It's going to get better. One of the problems with Roe versus Wade, it's based on 1973 technology, and it's not aged very well.
So again, the thing that we're going to disagree on here is the language. You keep using the word baby, and you said fetal heartbeat meaning that it's a fetus, but at 6 weeks, it's not even a fetus yet. And I guess I'll just go into another question here about your heartbeat bill. And you talked about some of the English common law and how that's used. Doesn't this law violate the doctrine of standing?
It's interesting, Professor. So federal law and state law differ here. Congress, believe it or not, Congress, which thinks it's all powerful, and federal courts think they are too, the U.S. Congress has limited authority to grant standing. It can only be based on specific injuries in specific areas. But in Texas, our Constitution and statutes are clear. In Texas, the legislature can grant standing to anyone. We've already done this. One of the examples we followed for this law was our Medicaid fraud statute. And in Texas today, this has been on the books for years, any person who discovers evidence of Medicaid fraud, whether they were harmed or not, any person can bring a claim. So this is a difference between state law and federal law. Under Texas law, the legislature can grant standing to anyone we see fit.
Yeah, we see in some states where the state will take up for domestic violence victims and say, look, now we're representing your interests.
Yes.
And so that's a decision on a state by state level how they establish standing.
That's the state, Vince. Like, that's different. Like, if Senator Hughes were to punch you in the face, isn't it a little guy, he would never do that. But if you were to punch
because
you
we're
in
on
the
a
face,
video call,
I can't sue Senator Hughes on your behalf because I didn't like the fact that you punched you in the face.
The point I'm making is that the state can establish that it has standing in some states. What they do is they intervene on behalf of the domestic violence victim rather than the victim themselves being the one that brings the standing. So saying, look,
absolutely.
Yes,
but
it is.
Right, but that's the state. But he's talking about individuals here. Like
it is
individuals interfering on other individuals' behalf.
I would just say this along the lines we're discussing. It's a similar concept because, as you know, many criminal laws also have a civil corollary, right? If heaven forbid someone were to punch you, they'd be breaking the law, but you would also, there'd be a criminal action against them, but you would also have a civil cause of action, right? For assault, or actually for battery, right?
That's right. O.J. Simpson had a murder trial and a civil trial.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But
and I would say the difference here is, and again, it's not pleasant, but the difference here is the victim, the little unborn baby, is not there to bring the claim, which makes more sense that we allow the people of Texas to stand up on the little baby's behalf. But you're right. It's very similar with a civil and a criminal companion.